The Penzance Street Food Project supplies a hot meal each evening to those in our community who are experiencing food poverty. The service is run entirely by volunteers and until recently set up each night in the car park opposite the train station. At the moment it can be found each evening alongside St John's Hall and will soon be moving to a new location at the old parole office next door. I asked Steph, one of the volunteers, how long she had been with the organisation.
Been with Street Food Project since March, ever since we really had the cold weather snap. Sort of makes you realise sort of what everybody has to put up with outside. And
how did you find out about it?
Through Facebook, really. Just saw that and decided I'd want to help.
I've seen tonight there's all sorts of different things going on. There are people serving food, there's people bringing food along, people have just stood around chatting with the guests. I mean, what's your role in all of this?
I usually bring food, something for them to eat.
Do you enjoy cooking?
I do when it works out. Do have a few food disasters. I help serve and I help chat to the guests.
And how have you seen things change in that period of time? Because it's 4 or 5 months ago.
Yes. Well, obviously the weather's improved. Lovely day today. Makes it obviously nicer for the guests. But does make you appreciate what they have to put up with when they're living outside with a general day-to-day weather. In
terms of the guests then, is there a sort of regular guests? Are there sort of visitors? Do people come and go? How many would you get a night, would you say?
Oh, it can range anything from 30 to 40. I think now the weather has sort of slightly improved, probably a little less, and also as we've moved, it takes a little while for them to sort of work out where we are and pop along.
I had one of the servers tonight just mentioned to me, they said they thought it was a quiet night with about 18 people here. 18 seems like, well, there's still a lot of people that are needing feeding.
Yes, definitely a lot of people need feeding. I think with the football being on, there's lots of things outside that, you know, with the weather being nice, lots of extra things on can make a difference to the amount of numbers. But, you know, we hear the food amount we're still here to be able to feed 30 to 40, so and it can be passed on to another night.
Yeah. And in terms of the guests, you stop and have a chat with them. They're a good bunch?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Ever had any trouble with them?
I haven't personally. It all depends. There are some heated moments, but other than that, you know, same with any walk of life.
Adrian has been using the service since January. I asked him what originally brought him along.
Down on my luck, needed some basically some decent food.
Were you in Penzance at the time, or did you come into Penzance?
I came into Penzance, but I've been coming here for around 20 years now.
So you know the area very well?
Very well, yeah.
Yeah. And how'd you get on with the guys that are doing the serving?
Absolutely fine. Spot on.
And the food, is it like school dinners?
Not really. It's quite good food. It's not bad.
Do you get a variety?
Yes, you get well fed.
And what about sort of your rapport, your friendship, your relationship with the other guests that come along of an evening?
Some's good, some's not so good, but everybody seems pretty friendly enough when they're actually here. There is a little bit of arguments among the odd people now and again, but nothing serious.
And how do you see things changing in the future with the Street Food Project?
Well, I don't know. Does it really need to change too much? I mean, does it? It seems right enough to me. People are hungry, people come along, they get fed, they leave. Isn't that the whole point of it? There's a need for it, not just here, there's a need for it all the way up and down the country, just like food banks. And it's a real need. It's not just for alcoholics and drug users. It's for anybody that needs food. Basically, it's as basic as that, food.
It's non-judgmental. You could be in a business suit, you could be in rags, you could be a drug addict, you could be from a family with no money.
It is made very clear that if you want feeding, you come to the food project. You come to the Street Food Project. It doesn't matter where you're from.
And there's no questions asked.
They don't care. They absolutely do not care who they are feeding. It could be anybody.
Genuine caring.
Genuine caring, yeah.
I'm now with a gentleman called Russ. How are you doing tonight, Russ?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Yeah. And why have you come up to St John's Hall this evening?
For the great company, all the people we're with, and the food, and all the staff are really good and helpful and friendly. Help you out.
And so you've had a good evening up here. The food's good. You're heading off back to your tent this evening?
Yeah, go back to half a tent.
Half a tent. Well, that's the other thing. You've had a problem with your tent recently.
Yeah,
so it's not
probably
really
where it's positioned. It's some of the locals don't seem to respect you being there, but we keep the place clean and tidy.
So the tent is the only thing you've got to live in at the moment,
Yeah,
and somebody's
somebody's
had a go at it, or
somebody set fire to the bottom of it.
set fire to your tent, your home. The Penzance Street Food Project was able to come to Russ's aid and find him a new tent. The service isn't just about food, as I found out when I sat down with Emily Stubbins, one of the Street Food Project organisers and the leader for Sundays.
We have a really kind of a big role as like a signposting service. So we sort of signpost to lots of different people that can help our guests in different ways. People like Ad Action, Breadline, but we also kind of support our guests maybe emotionally, which I think is something that they really lack. We sort of talk them through different things that are going on with them and actually care and give them that time of day that really makes a difference. We've been able to support people with applications for housing, for jobs, and actually had some really positive results out of that, with people getting jobs and people getting into housing.
So it's not just an hour a night serving people food, whoever they may be, just because they're hungry or they can't afford to buy their own food. There's a lot more to it, to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really holistic service.
And of the guests that have sort of been to the table, that have passed through, I presume you've seen some come and go, and you've seen regulars who are still coming today?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a couple of regulars that have been here since I've sort of been involved. But actually it's really interesting to see how they've progressed and the journey that they're on. We've had some real lovely success stories and people transitioning from being in a really poor state to actually now looking at, can I come and volunteer? Can I kind of come and give back? And they kind of come full circle, which is really nice. But yeah, we do have a transient sort of base of guests as well. People that only need our support for a couple of weeks, and actually they're then back on their feet. We had a young couple that came down a few weeks ago that said, they were housed. There wasn't any issue with homelessness or anything like that, but their landlord was selling up. They needed to get into a new property. They just spent all of their money on a deposit for their new property. They'd fed their children, but they couldn't afford to feed themselves, and they came down. They weren't sure if we were going to help them. They were a bit worried that we only feed homeless people, and we were like, no, we will feed anyone that is hungry for whatever reason. We will feed them. And they were a bit embarrassed, but they were absolutely over the moon, and they went away really well fed and feeling okay about it. They didn't feel, we treat everybody with dignity. It's not a charitable thing. We're working with solidarity with the community rather than charity.
So you say it's not a charitable thing. So where does all the funding come from then, for the food, for the time that's used, for the kitchen space to cook it all up? Where is it funded?
Primarily, it is from our volunteers.
What, in their homes?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got we have a huge base of volunteers, as I've said, and they buy most of the ingredients themselves. They donate to the project, not only their time but their resources as well. And we actually have some amazing people as well that fundraise for us, which is brilliant, and that gives us the kind of underlying costs that we need to kind of run our baseline.
I was talking to one of the other volunteers earlier, and she said that originally you're based at the station in Penzance. We're now stood in the old probation office. Do you see that as being a positive move? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We had a really, really tough winter last year. We had obviously the snow in sort of early spring, February, March, which was a complete disaster because actually a lot of our sort of lead volunteers live just outside of town, so they couldn't even drive in, and we had real issues with people absolutely freezing, and they've got nowhere to sit. We're stood outside in a car park. If it's raining, you get wet. If it's snowing, you get snowed on. It's grim.
In those circumstances, don't the local council have an obligation to house homeless people who haven't got anywhere to go? And how can they access that support if they've not got phones or...
Yeah, so that is quite difficult. So the council do have quite a good service, actually, the severe weather emergency protocol, and when that's put into force, there will be emergency accommodation provided for anybody that is in need of it. The problem with that is that you've got to call a number, speak to a person, answer some quite bureaucratic questions, which is all completely understandable, and that's absolutely needed. But when you're in a position where this is your life and you're feeling very emotional about that, and you haven't slept and you've been in the freezing cold for days on end, actually you might not necessarily have the mental capacity to be able to deal with that situation.
Effectively giving up.
Yeah, and we found a lot of people had tried to phone and just couldn't get through, as in couldn't get through the process, or they weren't able to call because they didn't have the money for a payphone and they didn't have a mobile phone to call from. So we actually worked with a lot of our guests to sort of call that service on their behalf, talk them through the questions and advocate for them, and we got a number into emergency accommodation over that period, which was really positive.
And looking back sort of 6 months to when it was snowy, very, very cold, today it's very warm and lots of sunshine here in Penzance. Do the figures, the amount of guests that you serve of an evening, does that change, or is it sort of steady? Because a lot of people see it as a developing problem and deteriorating.
Actually, the numbers on average stay very, very similar. So we tend to work out enough food for about 30 people. Occasionally it kind of goes up to about 40, sometimes we have about 20, but realistically over the entire time that I've been doing it, it hasn't massively fluctuated. So I don't think it's deteriorating in the way that potentially people think it is or has. The thing that does have the biggest impact on how many guests we serve is whether or not it's raining. Because if you can imagine, if you're living in a tent, if you're sort of settled in for the evening and you've got to walk sort of 40 minutes to get to service and get absolutely soaked, you've then got this kind of dilemma of whether to stay in your tent, stay dry but hungry, or to go out, get wet and be fed, but then you're absolutely soaked for the rest of the evening and you've got no way of getting dry. So that is one of the real positives of having the building, is that at least if people are making that journey to come to us in wet weather, they've got 40 minutes to an hour to sort of dry off and warm up before they've got to make the journey back again. And
it does seem to be a very slick operation, sort of pitching up at 6 o'clock of an evening, getting all the food out, serving the guests, having a chat, sorting out any problems they may have, and it seems to all be cleared up by around about 7. Has it always been that way, or has it evolved? I think it has definitely evolved. It's kind of a bit of an initiation of fire when I first took over as lead on a Sunday, but the volunteers are brilliant. We do have it down to a bit of a fine art now. The food comes ready, cooked and prepped, ready to go. So it's literally just a case of getting the tables out, putting everything on, and then getting gone. So it works really well. Has it been a busy evening? It has, actually. We haven't had probably quite as many visitors as is normal, but we've served about 20-25 people. We did Italian food tonight, so spaghetti bolognese, and it all went quite well. Do you have themed evenings normally? We tend to on a Sunday, so a lot of the nights during the week tend to have a business that supports them, and they'll do a similar sort of meal each week. Sundays we've got a lot of volunteer cooks, so we quite often just pick something random and do something different every week, just sort of change it up a bit and have something interesting for the guests to look forward to. You've got local Penzance businesses involved with this? Yeah, we absolutely do. We've got some really, really brilliant support from local businesses. We've got a couple of the Indian restaurants, Little India and the Light of Bengal. They cook on a Monday. The Queen's Hotel cook on a Monday as well. We also have support from the Bakehouse in Penzance, the Victoria Inn at Perranethno, amongst a lot of others as well. We've had some really, really positive support. It sounds incredibly organised and well put together. How long has the Street Food Project actually been in action? So the service itself has been in action for about 7 or 8 years, and it was initially started by Churches Together. Street Food Project, underneath Growing Links, has been going for about 18 months, nearly 2 years I think. It's kind of rapidly gone from a just once a week sort of service to every single night of the week, all of the year, so 365 days a year we serve. And you seem to have a ready band of volunteers. Do they vary day in, day out? Yeah, so we've got an amazing bank of volunteers. We've got about 2,500 people that are in our sort of Facebook group. Of that, probably about 200 are active volunteers who attend, once or twice a month, and we've got a really good core support team as well that will do every week. They'll come and help serve or cook or pick up as well. So it's not just the same people that kind of come and cook and then serve and bring it all down. We actually have people that do individual jobs, so that everybody works together really, really well as a team. And how long have you been involved with the Street Food Project then?
Probably coming up to about a year. So I got involved at the tail end of last summer.
How did you find out about it?
It was actually through some of the negative press that the project received on Facebook. So back then there was a bit of a foray about it being at the station. I sort of saw all these comments and were reading through and thought, actually, this looks like a really worthwhile project. And that's really something that's quite interesting that comes from whenever we have a bout of negative press, actually, it almost kind of works in the opposite for us, that it brings a whole load of new people and breathes new life into the project. Lots of people find out about us, go, oh, that's really good, actually, that's really positive sort of action that I can get involved with. So that's how I got involved, and I started off just sort of cooking every now and again, and then I arranged a big collection of warm sort of clothing at work, and brought over sort of 200 items down.
If anyone wants to get involved with the organisation, they can contact them either through Facebook by typing in Penzance Street Food Project into the search engine there and looking up the page or the group. Alternatively, you can join them any evening at 6 o'clock at the old parole office at St John's Hall, where you can meet the leaders, see what happens, and be talked through how the process works.
Honestly, this is the best place I've been down to, and the food, the staff, everything. Honestly, I've never had such good food. I've got toothbrush and toothpaste, absolutely wonderful.